When I was between the ages of 11 and 15, a series of inexplicable encounters with an entity left an indelible mark on my perception of the paranormal. Despite being someone who didn't fully embrace the supernatural, I couldn't deny the strange occurrences that unfolded during those years. The first unsettling incident transpired when I was 11, during an overnight campout in the southwest United States. Nestled in one of our favorite secluded spots near a calm river, the day had passed without incident. As night settled in, I shared a tent with my friend, our fathers in another. Camping had always been a challenge for me, and that night was no exception. I was the last to succumb to sleep, drifting off around 11 p.m. Abruptly, I awoke at 2 a.m., wondering why I was so alert. The stillness of the night was shattered by the sound of movement outside our tent. Initially dismissing it as one of our dads needing to step out, my comfort dissolved as the rustling continued without the typical sounds of a tent zipper or fabric. As my imagination ran wild, the entity emitted yips, reminiscent of coyotes but eerily distinct. My friend slept undisturbed, and my inquiries yielded no response from our fathers. Terrified, I huddled in my sleeping bag as the entity circled our tent, emitting snuffles and yips. No other coyotes answered its calls. Eventually, the sound ceased, and I managed to drift back to sleep. The following morning, my solo investigation revealed no signs of a coyote, no prints, hair, or scat within a 100-foot radius. Strangely, my friend discovered a bare human footprint along the riverbank. We left after breakfast, oblivious to the impending summer storm that would later flood our former campsite. A year later, at 12, my unease returned on a summer night. Opting to sleep on our house's covered balcony, I awoke at 1 a.m. to the familiar yipping. This time, curiosity overcame fear. Peering through the balcony window, I glimpsed a creature, not a coyote, crouched on two legs. Its approximate human size and shape vanished into the darkness, leaving me sleepless and haunted. 3 years passed before the entity resurfaced when I was 15, now in the Pacific Northwest. Locking eyes with a coyote on my walk home, an unsettling intelligence emanated from its gaze. The following night, a violent thunderstorm narrowly spared my bedroom from a fallen tree. The question lingers: was this entity a harbinger of storms, a mysterious force guiding me? Despite the desire for closure, the enigma endures. Whenever I hear a coyote call, the memories resurface, forever entwined with the scent and sound of rain. The entity remains a mystery, its presence leaving an indelible mark on my understanding of the inexplicable. 13 years ago, at the age of 33, I found myself living alone in the vast wilderness of Montana, following the footsteps of my father and his father before me as a seasoned hunter. One fateful morning, a sense of adventure coursed through me, and I decided to embark on a solitary camping trip to a remote spot deep within the woods. As I sipped on a steaming mug of coffee, I packed my bags and secured my trusty .500 Magnum in its holster on my belt. Before setting out, I made a call to my brother, requesting him to pick up my loyal dog and take her back to his place. With everything in order, I hit the road, anticipating a familiar connection with nature that had always been a part of my hunting expeditions. The drive to the trailhead was uneventful, but as I arrived, an eerie silence enveloped the surroundings. The stillness persisted as I ventured onto the path, and a disconcerting feeling crept over me. The absence of the usual sounds of birds, bugs, or rustling branches put me on edge, and I instinctively kept my hand on my Magnum. For the next 2 hours, the unsettling silence persisted, creating a sense of isolation that intensified with every step. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being stalked by an unseen predator. 3 hours into my hike, I reached the chosen campsite, a breathtaking spot perched on a ridge overlooking the small town I called home. Relief washed over me as the sounds of nature resumed while I set up my tent. However, the tranquility was short-lived. Abruptly, the symphony of nature gave way to an oppressive silence. The trees began knocking against each other in the wind, and a twig snapped, disrupting the newfound peace. I turned, hand gripping my gun, to face the source of the disturbance. Into the woods, about 20 feet away, a twig had snapped. My eyes scanned the unmoving forest until a rustling, followed by massive footsteps, seized my attention. Gripping my gun, I turned to see a creature unlike anything I'd ever encountered. This demon-like being had the legs and horns of a goat, stood on 2 feet, and possessed a brown, hairy body with human-like arms. Its face, however, defied any logical description, resembling a kangaroo with eyes radiating pure malice. I raised my gun, firing a shot into the air to scare it away, but instead, it emitted a terrifying scream, a mix of a fox, a deer's mating call, and a blood-curdling human wail. The creature approached me with a sinister slowness, and I felt paralyzed by its gaze. I fired another shot into the air, prompting a deafening scream that reverberated through the forest. As it loomed over me, I could sense its malevolence. In a moment of desperate defiance, I screamed back and, to my surprise, it hesitated. But the standoff was short-lived. The creature pushed me to the ground, its snout nearly touching mine. I regained my footing, desperation and fear pumping through my veins. The creature screamed again, shaking the entire forest. With my gun aimed at its throat, I screamed back, commanding it to back off. It remained, unfazed. In a desperate act of self-preservation, I pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through the woods, and the creature retreated, disappearing into the shadows. I hastily packed my belongings, its haunting presence still lingering at a distance. It followed me, a menacing specter, as I retraced my steps to my motorcycle. Speeding away at reckless speeds, the creature's final scream echoed, a chilling reminder of the otherworldly encounter. Now, 13 years later, with a wife and 2 kids, the memories of that harrowing day persist. There's a primal urge within me to return, to face that forest demon and claim its head as a trophy. Yet, responsibility and the love for my family tether me to a reality where such reckless pursuits could jeopardize everything I hold dear. The yearning remains, but the stakes are too high, and the haunting memory of that creature keeps me from risking it all. In the summer of 2012, I was just a 13-year-old kid, living in the heart of central Illinois in a quaint farm town. Our house, surrounded by towering cornfields, stood as a solitary outpost against the vast expanse of greenery. Growing up amidst the corn never bothered me, it was as much a part of my childhood as the warm summer breeze. I was the only one among my friends who called the countryside home, making my place the go-to spot for our adventures. My best friend, Max, shared my love for the outdoors. We spent our days exploring, fishing down by the creek, taking refreshing dips in our pool, and crafting makeshift shelters in the backyard. When the sun dipped below the horizon, we'd retreat to my room, losing ourselves in the glow of video games. But that particular summer, the routine took an unexpected turn. Max and I decided to break away from the norm and camp out in the backyard one weekend. Armed with a tiny 2-person tent and a small fire pit, we transformed our modest yard into an imaginary wilderness. The backyard wasn't vast, but it had enough trees to make our campout feel like a genuine adventure. After setting up our campsite and cooking some grub over the crackling fire, fatigue eventually caught up with us. We decided to call it a night unusually early. While I'd usually shy away from the idea of sleeping outside alone, the presence of my buddy Max and my trusty dog Max, yes, confusing, I know, provided a sense of security. Nightfall settled in, and the surroundings faded into darkness as we snuggled into our sleeping bags. My dog patrolled the yard, a loyal guardian in the moonlit night. The sliding glass door of my parents' bedroom overlooked our campsite, allowing them to keep a watchful eye on us. The night remained undisturbed until an inexplicable event jolted me awake. My dog's barks, usually gentle, now reverberated with a sinister tone. Confused and disoriented, I strained to identify the source of his distress. Then, I heard it, an eerie, erratic whistle, seemingly devoid of any human rhythm. It echoed from an indistinct direction, piercing the stillness of the night. My instincts kicked in, and I roused Max from his slumber. Wide-eyed and alert, we exchanged silent glances, both unnerved by the unnatural sound that had invaded our peaceful night. I fumbled for my phone, revealing the dreaded hour, 3 a.m., the witching hour. A shiver ran down my spine as Max and I acknowledged the supernatural implications. Hesitant but determined, Max suggested calling my dad to dispel the unease. The phone rang, and my groggy father answered. I explained the situation, my voice tinged with fear, yet the whistling persisted in the background, mocking our attempts to seek reassurance. Dismissively, my dad attributed it to a bird, dismissing our concerns with an infuriating nonchalance. Frustration and fear welled up within me as I hung up. Realizing my dad wouldn't be our savior, we made a swift decision: retreat to the safety of our home. We tore through the night, racing towards the house. The direction of the whistling became clearer. It emanated from the west, from the mysterious cornfields that bordered our property. Without daring to look back, we reached the sanctuary of our home, locking the door behind us. My dad, roused from his sleep, engaged in a futile attempt to prove us wrong. He opened a window, expecting silence to vindicate his skepticism. To our dismay, the whistling ceased, and my dad, seemingly victorious, retreated to his slumber, leaving us haunted by the enigma of the night. Unable to shake off the fear, we spent the remaining hours of darkness attempting to rationalize the inexplicable. We settled on the notion of coyotes, a feeble attempt to convince ourselves that the unnatural sounds had a mundane origin. As the sun dawned, we managed to coax ourselves into a restless sleep. The following day, with my parents away at work, Max and I set out to find my dog. To our relief, he appeared unharmed, his usual exuberance undeterred by the mysterious events of the night. With newfound courage in the daylight, we decided to enjoy the outdoors, revving up our dirt bikes for an afternoon ride. Our carefree adventure, however, took an ominous turn. As we rounded a familiar bend, Max abruptly signaled for me to stop. His eyes widened in terror as he whispered, "Heard it again." I followed his gaze, directing my attention towards the nearby cornfield. The whistle, once again, penetrated the air, casting a shadow over our brief reprieve. The remainder of that day saw us confined indoors, our curiosity overpowered by the lingering fear. Although I never laid eyes on the source of the strange whistling, its haunting melody stayed with me. As the days turned into years, the memory of that summer night faded, but the inexplicable events continued to perplex me. Now, at 23, with a wife and daughter, I've long since left the small farm town. The echoes of that haunting whistle are but a distant memory. I hope to never encounter it again, for the inexplicable events of that summer night still send shivers down my spine. In the days of my youth, nestled between the realms of childhood innocence and the looming specter of adolescence, I found solace in the mysterious allure of the paranormal and supernatural. While my classmates embarked on mundane journeys of fishing tales and do-it-yourself projects, I, captivated by the enigmatic, chose to delve into the world of skinwalkers for a school essay. The genesis of my fascination can be traced back to an episode of a paranormal investigative show, A Fateful Encounter with Skinwalker Canyon. From that moment on, my curiosity knew no bounds. I immersed myself in folklore, spending countless hours unraveling the mystique surrounding these elusive beings. The culmination of my research manifested in a proud accomplishment, a 12-page essay that stood as a testament to my passion for the inexplicable. Little did I know that the seeds of my curiosity would soon sprout into a surreal encounter that defied the boundaries of the ordinary. It was the summer between 6th and 7th grade, a season of transition marked by a familial move that brought us closer to my grandmother. Our new abode, nestled just 15 minutes away from our previous home, was ensconced in dense woods that had been our childhood haven. My younger brother and I had spent countless hours exploring the confines of our wooded sanctuary. While our property was modest, the expanse of the forest provided ample room for adventure. Every nook and cranny held the imprint of our youthful escapades, and I reveled in the familiarity of the outdoors, particularly when accompanied by my loyal canine companions. Our house, perched atop a small hill, boasted a modest porch that overlooked the dense woods. It was on this perch that I would often find myself at dusk, a time when the forest murmured with nocturnal secrets. The tree line, a mere 20 yards away, cast an enchanting silhouette against the fading light, creating an ambience of both comfort and mystery. One July night, as the veil between day and night hung in delicate balance, I stood on the porch engrossed in a favorite book. The tranquility of the moment was shattered by an ephemeral rustling emanating from the woods. Attuned to the nuances of our woodland neighbors, I assumed it was another visitation by the resident deer. Anticipation hung in the air as a pale, slender figure emerged from the shadows. A fleeting thrill gripped me as the creature revealed itself. However, this was no ordinary deer. Its neck extended a tad too long, and its limbs appeared unnaturally spindly. My fascination dissolved into confusion as logic struggled to reconcile the creature before me with the familiar form of a deer. It drew closer, each step defying the laws of nature. The thrill of terror replaced my initial curiosity. This was no ordinary deer, and my instincts urged me to retreat. I hastily backed away from the railing, seeking refuge indoors and locking the door behind me. The creature's eyes met mine, an eerie acknowledgement of my presence that sent shivers down my spine. I confided in my mother, a sense of urgency in my voice as I relayed the peculiar encounter. Concern etched across her face, she safeguarded my younger brother and our dogs, sealing the house against potential threats. In the ensuing days, we moved away, not because of the eerie encounter, but the timing added a peculiar twist to our departure. Years passed, and the memory of that anomalous deer faded into the recesses of my mind. It wasn't until a few nights ago, as I perused cryptid tags on an app, that the floodgates of recollection opened. Videos and stories of creatures dubbed, not deer, captivated my attention, and the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. The memories of that fateful July night resurfaced, and I realized that the story I once believed to be a product of my 12-year-old imagination was, in fact, a reality. Embarrassment tinged with a sense of irony washed over me. How had I, a dedicated enthusiast of the paranormal, failed to recognize the creature for what it was until now? Rather than succumb to self-reproach, I chose to share my story, a testament to the strange and unexplained moments that weave themselves into the fabric of our lives. In the wake of this revelation, my gaze now lingers on the woods beyond my window, a latent curiosity rekindled. I find myself wondering if, amid the shadows, a pair of enigmatic eyes might one day peer back at me, opening a portal to the inexplicable once more. In the eerie silence of Pripyat, our Geiger counters ticking quietly, my 4 friends and I embarked on a journey filled with anticipation and trepidation. We had meticulously obtained clearance and armed ourselves with Geiger counters, determined to explore the Ukrainian town that had long been abandoned in the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster. Little did we know that our one-day adventure would unveil chilling encounters beyond our imagination. As we stepped into the desolate town, my friend Kevin couldn't help but comment on the unsettling silence that enveloped us. The clocks in the abandoned buildings displayed a frozen 11:55, serving as a haunting reminder of the abrupt evacuation that had taken place years ago. The amusement park, once filled with laughter, now stood frozen in time, its mid-ride bumper cars and creaking Ferris wheel painting a picture of a bygone era. An uncanny stillness gripped the air, as if a colossal void had swallowed the lively essence of the people who once called Pripyat home. Our Geiger counters reassured us with low radiation levels, providing a false sense of security. We agreed to stick together, promising that if anyone began feeling unusual, we would make a swift exit. Yet, the abnormality began to unfold before us as my friend Brandon pointed out the haunting effects of radiation on the local wildlife. A lone wolf, its presence foreboding, skulked around with eyes that told a gruesome tale. Its once vibrant eyes had turned completely white, an unnerving sight that left us on edge. Deciding to set up camp, we sought refuge in one of the less radioactive buildings, attempting to find solace beneath its dilapidated roof. Brandon, ever intuitive, voiced a sense of unwelcome presence, echoing the unease that resonated within each of us. A decision was made, and we found ourselves in a building that offered minimal radiation and a sheltered space to rest. That night, however, would etch itself into my memory with an indelible mark. Awoken by a bizarre moaning sound, akin to a dying lawnmower, I found my friends already sitting up, ears strained to the unsettling noise. Before I could inquire about the mysterious sound, Brandon somberly pointed behind my friend Grant. What we witnessed next defied explanation and sent shivers down our spines. Standing at an imposing height of 6.5 feet, a figure emerged, a person, if you could still call it that. Their skin bore a sickly shade of beet red, two completely red eyes staring into the abyss, and a grotesque, vestigial limb protruding from their left arm. I questioned aloud, "Does radiation even do that?" My companions, gripped by fear, wasted no time, they gathered their belongings and fled. I followed suit, stealing a glance back to witness the mysterious figure swaying and groaning, as if enslaved to a force beyond comprehension. Back home, as Brandon sought solace with his parents, Grant and I grappled with the realization that what we had witnessed might be a victim of radiation gone awry. Kevin and Maria, the other two in our group, remained tight-lipped, unwilling to revisit the horrors of that night. It became an unspoken pact amongst us not to broach the subject again. Now, as I share this harrowing tale, a warning echoes in my words. Pripyat, despite its haunting beauty, harbors the remnants of a catastrophic event. The radiation lingers, and some unfortunate souls, whether unable or unwilling, never left. To those considering a visit, keep your eyes and ears open. The shadows of the past may still roam the abandoned streets, and you might, as we did, encounter the spectral remnants of a tragedy that refuses to fade into history.